You've been hand-picked for what you thought was a great opportunity, and you think your placement is based on merit when you're asked to join a committee of 8 men, but you are the only woman amongst a group of more mature and quite conservative men. And of course, you are the youngest on the board and the only female. You now feel it may be tokenism. What do you do about it? Do you accept it and be grateful? Do you decline? Do you work hard? It's a pretty interesting issue to deal with, and some of our members have directly dealt with them themselves, so I'm looking forward to hearing a bit more information from them on that side. And Natalie.
I've definitely been in that situation on numerous occasions, Madeline. And I've been in that situation as a director and also as a CEO working to, at the time, a 14-member board that was all males and all much older than me. So very, very challenging, and in both of those scenarios you've got stakeholders that it's really important to you to be accepted by and that you want to contribute to, but actually they're pre-existing, so they've got an operating rhythm that you need to find a way to understand and inject yourself into as well. So I've drawn on a lot of lessons that I learned incrementally, obviously, when I was in defence. That was very male-dominated as well. So I think there's a really interesting mindset that you bring to it, and that is that it's a marathon and not a sprint. And I mentioned that to someone the other day, and they shared with me some research that has just been released by Sharon Bell, which is actually on the Veski website if you're interested. And it's a really helpful mindset to bring to bear because it takes the pressure off having to get yourself to exactly where you want to be overnight. And you then can draw on tactics. And some things that I found really useful are breaking that operating rhythm by having one-on-one coffees and chats and briefings, building a rapport with people so that they can learn a little bit about you and you can learn about them and form a relationship. I've also broken the dynamic of how the board used to meet, and so organised things like icebreakers with inductions and inductions with icebreakers even, and dinners and things like that, where there's actually no board work going on, but it's about reframing and going through that forming, norming stage as well. So I think that understand it's not going to be easy, but please do sign up for it, because my view is that myself taking that on has made it easier for the women that have come after me. So I think we can all have our part to play.
Great, Natalie, thanks. And Michelle, I'll get you to share your story as well.
It's an interesting scenario. Since I left by Melbourne Network, I've taken on quite a few board roles, and one in particular was exactly this case. And I guess the way I approached it was asking the chairman, when I spoke to the chairman, about why he had selected me, what skills he thought I would bring to the board. I think he thought he was going to interview me. But it turned out that I'd interviewed him and he quite liked it, I think, because I'm still there. Yeah, I still got the letter. Yeah, come on, Michelle. But, you know, it's really curious because you see a lot of this happening, and I think for those of you in the audience that are scientists, I've seen this particularly working in conferences where you've got a steering committee, and one of the things I really love, Nadia Rosenthal, who's the director at the Australian Regenerative Medicine Institute, I saw her do this, get onto a steering committee, and one of the first things she asked was how many female invited speakers there were, because there were no other women on the steering committee, and then how many young investigators were involved in the steering committee. So it's not just about gender here, it's also about diversity. But she's a wonderful vanguard. You know, she opens up these opportunities really well, and I certainly copied her behaviour quite a bit actually in the last few years of my career, because I think even if it is tokenism, just take it, get in there and encourage other women to follow. So make the suggestions. You've got to be in the tent. There's no point talking outside the tent.
Very good. And Dina?
This lends itself to both what Natalie and Michelle have said. One of the things to be really clear about is what's important to you, and really thinking about who you are at your core. So if we think of dinners, if we think of icebreakers, bringing your whole self to those dinners and icebreakers so that you're forming relationships and being very true to who you are. So you are being authentic. And if I think of what Michelle said, it's just as important to interview them as it is for them to interview you. And in that interview, think about what's really important to you, what's at your core, even asking questions around, what strengths can I bring to this role, etc., etc. So make sure that you're your authentic self, because we know if you're your authentic self, you are going to succeed. And getting on boards is about succeeding, trying things, don't get me wrong, trying things, being a little bit vulnerable, but putting your best self forward.
Thank you. And I did share this with the panel when we were doing a briefing session last week. But as I mentioned earlier, in the world of engineering, at the senior sort of board management level, there's quite a bit of lack of diversity in general, but particularly gender diversity is a highlight. And I was invited a few years ago to consider coming on as a director of a board, which is great. Started all the I suppose the ice breaking at the start over coffee and a bit of a discussion. But when I sort of came into the conversation, I realised that there were about 3 or 4 of the male directors who were all chatting, who were describing when they'd all played football together, which is great in terms of a bonding thing. They had that in common. But I suddenly realised my point that I was going to say was that I wasn't actually born at the time that they played football, which I didn't think was necessarily the best icebreaker to go with. But it did make me giggle, and in terms of found an alternative way to build relationships with those guys. Some of them I already knew from various senior engineering networks anyway, but to find it was important for me to understand what value I could add into that piece. I certainly wasn't as senior in terms of them, in terms of experience, but the diversity of view and what that board has actually achieved in that last couple of years by changing focus, looking at things differently, re-engineering processes, different models of engagement. We're actually now standalone as the best board in that particular area around that side. So don't underestimate the value that you think you can bring in a different situation like that, even if you're not as experienced or come from a completely different background, because if you develop that confidence in yourself and understandability, you can actually find a line, strategic direction and make a difference. And I think, and that's quite rewarding for your own personal development going forward from that side. But it's not always easy to do that. You don't automatically go in and go, yep, I'm an experienced board director, good to go, I can roll it out. It is a learning process as well. So don't give up. Persistence and growing those skills is just as important as putting yourself out there in the initial instance.